Welcome to another episode of Take 121. Well, viewers, draft drug policy, ever since it's been proposed, it has stirred up a hornet's nest. Experts have given their opinion about it, and the people associated with the pharma industry have expressed their reservations about this policy. The people about whom it's said that some say the government says, and the representatives of government say that it's a people-friendly policy that's being proposed. On the other hand, the people associated with the pharma industry say that it's anti-pharma industry and it has got nothing to do with the health, and it's not going to bring any better change in the system. Today in this episode we'll be talking to the Dr. Gir Mohammed Ishaq, who is the Senior Assistant Professor, Department of Pharmaceutical Studies, University of Kashmir. Dr. Gir Mohammed Ishaq Sahab, welcome to our program.
Thank you.
My first question is, when so much of controversy it has evoked, this draft drug policy, what actually the commoners would like to know, what actually is draft drug policy and what it means to the commoners?
Yes, Altaf Sahab, for the last several years, or rather several decades, Jammu and Kashmir state was one of those unfortunate states which did not have any policy framework in relation to the use of drugs. We had no policy as such for several decades. And after several years, the government of J&K took the initiative and prepared a draft drug policy whose basic objective is to ensure quality, safety, accessibility of drugs and their efficacy. Accessibility of drugs means affordability as well as availability, and besides ensure quality, safety and efficacy of drugs not only in public sector but also in private sector, and then to streamline prescribing practices, good dispensing practices and rational use of drugs. Rational use of drugs is a broader term which covers good storage facilities, good distribution, effective mechanisms of procurement and supply in hospitals. So it's a whole gamut of issues that are covered under draft drug policy. The main idea being to ensure quality, safety and efficacy and make drugs affordable and accessible to patients at government health facilities.
Experts are saying now that drugs under this policy would be available under the generic names rather than the branded names. What actually does this concept mean?
Yes, you have pointed out to a very crucial issue. In fact, all the discussions surrounding drug policy have unfortunately been restricted to generic drug policy, whereas it is only one of the provisions of the drug policy, and there are many other provisions which are of equal importance, if not more, but which need to be addressed simultaneously. But so far as generic drugs are concerned, generic drugs are those drugs which have gone off the patent. See, whenever any pharmaceutical industry spends billions of dollars on any new drug molecule and develops a new drug molecule, they have got certain intellectual property rights on that new drug molecule. They have certain patent rights. They can fix the prices of those particular medicines for at least 20 years, and they can market that drug exclusively for 20 years against their own brand.
With the result, this drug comes very expensive.
Yes, as a result, sometimes very heavily the prices are charged on this drug because there are certain exclusive rights which the pharmaceutical company that has owned it and developed it has over that particular medicine. Now, after 20 years, when the time period of 20 years lapses, this particular drug goes off the patent. That means any other pharmaceutical company can manufacture the same drug on the basic salt name, not on the name of that particular brand which the previous company has been marketing. So they can, another company can manufacture the same drug on a generic name, on the salt name, maybe by manufacturing it by a different process. So that's what generic drug means. That means a drug which has gone off the patent, which is no more under that intellectual property rights, and company does not hold any exclusive rights over that particular medicine. So the benefit of having generic drugs is that whatever huge expenses are there on the research and development of new drug molecules, on the promotion and publicity of new drug molecules, and on the royalty payment of these patented medicines, those expenditures are saved. That means the generic drug costs much lower than the branded medicine, and that's how the patients benefit. So so far as the quality, safety and other parameters are concerned, generic drugs are as good as branded medicines. In fact, the US FDA definition of generic drug says that they are equivalent, bioequivalent, they are same as branded medicines in every respect. Now it is for the government to ensure that the drugs, generic drugs which they are purchasing they must be of the same quality, same efficacy, and same parameters must be followed as that were followed for the branded medicines. But universally they are as good, they are bioequivalent, and they are at par with the branded medicines. Now the whole controversy surrounding this generic medicines within the J&K state is that because once the generic prescribing starts in our government hospitals, the pharmaceutical distributors, the sellers, the pharmacy store owners who work outside the government hospitals, they feel that certainly their sales will drop, because government is planning to make all the generic drugs available within the hospital premises for the poor patients.
Would that be possible?
Yes, again
because our consumer base is very huge.
Yes,
very large.
That's a huge challenge given our poorly regulated markets, and given our there are corrupt practices in our drug regulatory mechanisms. There is no denial of that fact also, and given that poorly regulated markets and the prevalent practices, it's a huge challenge for the government to ensure that generic drugs are made available throughout the year in a government health facility for the benefit of the patients. They have to avoid stockouts, they have to avoid duplication. For that, they have to devise an effective procurement mechanism. The policy, there has to be a well-defined policy for procurement. That's why the essential drug list comes in, the concept of essential drug list, because in market there are more than 30,000 formulations available, and it's not practically possible to make most of those formulations.
Or you can in other words say that their drugs are available under 3,000, more than 3,000 branded names.
30,000, yes.
30,000 branded names.
More than 30,000 branded names drugs are available in the market. So that's not possible for the government to make that available in the hospital. But the essential drug list reduces this huge list to just 348 medicines.
What you call essential drug list.
What you call essential drug list, which are most essential drugs that are required in a hospital and which cater to most of the diseases. Then they don't cater to all the diseases, but most of the diseases. And those diseases which fall outside this list, there is a provision for complementary drug list. So 10% of the total budget will be saved for complementary drug list, which caters to rare diseases and those diseases which do not fall under this essential drug list. But essential drug list concept has been propagated and devised, and it has been advised by the World Health Organization.
Time-tested one.
It is a time-tested policy, and once you do it, it ensures economies of scale. That is, you can make maximum utilization of your limited resources. And many resource-poor countries like Bangladesh, like Thailand, many developing countries who do not have enough resources, and even within India, those many of the states have adopted this essential drug list, and they have shown enormous gains. Studies have shown that prices to the tune of 30 to 40% have been reduced in these various Indian states who have adopted essential drug policy. In fact, I need to mention that.
But could it be done at the cost of the quality of drugs?
No, not at all. Tamil Nadu Medical Supply Services Corporation has shown us the way. They have ensured cost as well as quality. See, when you go for tendering of medicines as per the drug policy, it's not the lowest bid which is the criteria. Anybody who quotes the lowest bid will not get the tenders. First, he has to pass through the technical criteria, technical bid. So it's a two-envelope system. The first envelope covers the technical criteria. Only those companies who fulfill the technical criteria can be invited in the second round for pricing. Then in the second round, whosoever quotes the lowest, he gets the tenders.
But people want to know that does the argument of the government hold water, this argument that it's people friendly? How is it people friendly? The people want to know.
Yes, basically let me tell you the facts which World Medicine Situation Report has revealed. As per the report, around 50 to 60% population in the world does not have access to medicines, and within India 60 to 65% population does not have access to medicines. That is, either it's not available to them or it's not affordable to them. So the whole idea,
affordability could be the bigger factor, yes, in our part of the world.
Yes. And in order to ensure availability and affordability in such countries, particularly within India, the essential drug list has shown enormous gains. It has shown a lot of benefits in improving those things, and that's where the drug policy comes in. That's where the generic policy, that's where the essential drug list comes in, because India has emerged as a leader in the pharmaceutical industry. Today, Indian pharmaceutical industry ranks 3rd in volume and 13th in rank, but still, unfortunately, per capita expenditure on medicines within India per annum is only $3, as against USA's $250, as against Japan's $422, as against Germany's $222. Just $3 per annum is the per capita expenditure on medicines within India. In spite of the fact that in 1980 that Indian pharmaceutical industry total turnover was only 280 crores. From 280 crores it has jumped to more than 104,000 crores in 2010. There have been phenomenal gains in, and it has emerged as a world leader to the extent that it supplies generic medicines to the tune of 22% of world market. And maximum number of pharmaceutical industries which are US FDA approved outside USA are from India. So that means
there is no dearth of generic drugs.
There is no dearth. I would say quality generic drugs. India is a world leader in providing quality generic drugs, standard quality generic drugs. So my question is, if India can supply standard quality generic drugs to USA, Europe, developing nations, so why not to its own people who are craving for the sake of drugs, where 50 to 60% of population still does not have access to medicines? So what is preventing? There is some inhibition in between, some hurdle which is preventing this to happen, and that hurdle is lack of policy, lack of implementation.
Are the reservations of the pharma industry well founded?
I don't know, actually the figures which have been quoted in the press and which have been quoted in the media, I find them quite little exaggerated, because if we go by the data, the total market of drugs in the J&K has been officially declared to be 400 crores in Kashmir Valley alone. So it has been said officially that we consume drugs worth 400 crores annually within Kashmir Valley. But how much is the budget for government hospitals? The government budget for drugs within all government hospitals of entire valley does not exceed 25 crores. That means the government budget,
there lies a huge chunk that lies outside government sector.
Yes, exactly. The government sector does not cover even 10% of the total worth of drugs which we consume. So maybe, okay, I accept that the actual worth of prescriptions generated from the government hospitals may be slightly more than the total budget of these hospitals, but how much more? In any case it will not exceed 10%. So how is it on the other hand the pharmaceutical,
and 90%, that means in other words 90% lies outside government domain?
Yes, 90% lies outside the government domain, but unfortunately our certain sections of our pharmaceutical trade, they claim that 80% of our business is dependent on the government sector. But here I fail to understand how 80% of pharmaceutical trade can depend on government sector when government sector comprises only 6 to 10% of the total market of medicines, and it is also being claimed that around 10 lakh people are dependent on this industry. So again I fail to understand how 10 lakh people will depend on a 25 crore budget. By that standards, each person's share does not fall even 250 rupees per annum.
Maybe there could be some self-centered designs of those people who are associated with the pharma industry. What could they be? Because they are, as you said, as per your own admission, they are exaggerating the figures. It could not be more than 10%.
See, actually government has to actually come out with the actual figures. What is the actual dependence on government sector, how many people depend on it. Then if the pharmaceutical traders have any genuine grievances, genuine problems, that must be addressed by the government. I am not against it. One of
their points is that we have taken heavy loans, and in spite of that, how would we cover up if this policy is allowed to be implemented? It would just ruin us. Not only ruin us, there are medical representatives. There is a huge base of medical representatives who are dependent on this pharma industry. What would happen of those?
Yes, that's exactly what I said, that the government has to establish first officially, what is the actual dependence, what is the total budget, and how much the pharmaceutical trade depends on the government sector, and what will be the impact of the policy on the pharmaceutical sector. Nobody should be left jobless, but it's not correct that all the medical representatives, all the pharmaceutical suppliers will be rendered jobless if this policy is implemented. Maybe their business will get affected to some extent, but to what extent, that needs to be established by the government, and the government needs to come out with figures. And if the figures say if the figures support the claims made by the pharmaceutical industry, then the government has to come out with alternative strategies. See, as I said in the beginning itself, that generic drug prescribing is only one of the provisions. That should not impede the implementation of the rest of the provisions of the policy. This whole policy should not be shelved just because of generic drug prescribing.
We should not be only talking about generic drugs.
Yes,
that's only one provision.
That is only one provision. And in order to address to those grievances of pharmaceutical traders, in the beginning what the government can do, the generic drugs can be made available only for the people who are living below poverty line, who come up with a ration card having BPL tag, and they
are making drugs available for them and affordable for them.
Not only affordable, we can make drugs free of cost available to them within government centers, absolutely free of cost. And then insurance sector also, insurance also has to be provided. In India, within J&K, most of the expenditure on drugs that people make it is out of pocket. But in Western countries, in developed nations, it's not out of pocket. Government pays for the majority of the drug expenditures through proper insurance schemes. Here the government also has to take similar initiatives. They have to make such insurance schemes like Rashtriya Swasthya Bima Yojana. They have to expand its purview, and so that the people do not have to pay out of their own pocket. And secondly, the drugs, generic drugs, have to be made available within the hospitals. But if somebody, I am always for the fact that if somebody is belonging to an affluent family and he can afford branded medicines, he should be allowed to have a choice. He should be allowed to have a choice, because we should not force it, because the problem here in our state is that even affluent people have to rely on the government sector. We don't have a well established private sector here. We don't have good chain of private hospitals. So even the
could it be made possible with the public private partnership as well?
Of course, that's a very good idea. Public private partnership is a very good idea, and the government has to develop we have to develop the private sector simultaneously. But unless that is done within the government hospitals, we can keep a choice for affordable for people who are affluent and who can afford branded medicines. Let them have a choice and let them take the branded medicines. But for people living below poverty line, or for lower middle class people who cannot afford costly medicines, I may just cite an example here. Recently, an anti-cancer drug which was being marketed by a German company, Bayer, it costed 2.8 lakh rupees for 1 month therapy. 2.8 lakh rupees, and the government had to invoke compulsory licensing provision, because poor people were not in a position to afford this drug. 2.8 lakhs for 1 month. So the government had to invoke compulsory licensing, and they allowed Natco Pharma, which is an Indian company, to manufacture a generic version of the same drug, and now it costs only around 8,800 rupees. So imagine the price difference.
It's considerable.
2.8 lakhs, it has come down to 8,800 rupees. Now it becomes affordable for a common man. Not only people living below poverty line, but even people living in belonging to lower middle class sections. Same is the case with other drugs. There is huge price difference, anywhere between 10% to 5,000%. If you take a small strip of cetirizine which costs around 30 rupees, generic version of the same drug costs only 50 paisa. So the drugs which are costly, exorbitant, which are not affordable for common people, certainly they become affordable. What else
does that mean for the commoner, that earlier when he used to go to the market to buy a paracetamol, now he can get it in acetaminophen name?
Yes, yes, exactly. He will get it on the people will get the prescriptions will be written on the basic salt name. But some people say that it is very difficult to remember these names, and it's very difficult for the drugstore managers to distribute drugs on these names. But
it's not necessary for the patients to remember those names.
No, not
once
for
they
the
remember these names, they also self-practice.
Exactly, that's self-medication is another problem which we are faced with, and the WHO has given a list of INN names. We call it international non-proprietary names. They have made these generic names sound easier, and they have provided a list of names which is known as INN list, international non-proprietary names. That is to be adopted in the government hospitals. That will make the prescription, dispensing and sale of these generic medicines easier in government hospitals. So name is not an issue, the terminology is not an issue at all. And then since the government is planning to provide these drugs within the hospital, so if they employ few qualified pharmacists within the hospital, it will not be a big difficulty at all, because qualified graduates are very well versed with all the nomenclature of the medicines. They can dispense the drugs. The problem which we are facing here in J&K is that we have a huge army of unqualified people who are managing the pharmaceutical sector. We have mushroom growth of drug stores everywhere, but manned by unqualified people, and qualified pharmacy graduates do not find any position available anywhere.
And it's one of the biggest industries.
That is one of the biggest industry, and if qualified pharmacy people are employed, good clinical pharmacy services can be made available in the hospitals. Today you see that most of the times patients feel unsatisfied. They don't know what's happening with them, what tests are being conducted, what drugs are being prescribed. That's because there's a huge gap between a doctor and a patient. Doctor is overloaded, he doesn't have time to educate a patient, and the patient is left in lurch, he doesn't know what's happening with him. So if there are clinical pharmacy services, if qualified graduates are employed, they can bridge this gap, they can fill this void, they can communicate to the patient what's happening, what tests are being done, and that will bring a drastic change in the compliance, in the results.